Welcome at Chhatrapati Sambhaji Raje Global School and Junior College, Ambazogai, for online classes.
Hello students, this is our first video on second chapter of physics of class 9. The name of chapter is Force and Laws of Motion. So in the previous chapter, we learned about the motion. So name of previous chapter is motion. We learn about the motion, types of motion. So what is the velocity of an object? What is the initial position of an object? What is the acceleration of an object? So we learn all these things about the motion. So how the object is in motion. So what is the motions? So all these things we learn in a last chapter. So in that chapter, we learn about the causes of motions. Yet we don't discuss about the causes of motions. How to move the objects. What are the causes of motions? So we take one example. So suppose that is the chair. If we apply the force on that chair, we pull that chair like this, chair is in motion. If we push that chair like this, the chair is in motion. We stop, if I stop the pull or push the chair will look, that chair will stop. It is at rest, it doesn't move. Because if we apply the force, which is pull or push, if we pull that chair is in motion. If we push that chair is in motion also. If we stop applying the force, if we don't apply the force on that chair, the chair remains at same position, constant position, at a rest. It doesn't move. Because if we apply the force on anything, any object, that object get moving, start to move. If we apply the force, that object start to move. So that is the main concept. If we pull or push the object, that object becomes move. So that is the concept. What are the causes of motion? If we apply the force on that object, the object get displaced, object get moved by applying some force. So these are the causes of motion. Causes of motion is what? Mainly if we apply the force on any object, that object get in motion. So that is the main cause of object. So next, we take one more example. So we can say about the example of that chair, we can say the pull and push is the force. Pull and push is the force. Pull and push. If we pull or push the object, that object will be displaced. So we can say that pull and push is called a force. And due to application of that force, the object get displaced, object get moved. So we take one more example. Suppose that is a carom, that is a carom board. So here is the striker. Here is the striker. If we strike that striker, strike get moving. Strike get moving. So striker get moving. That striker moves and stop here. That is the initial position. That is the final position. So if we strike that striker get move and stop here. Means we strike means we push that striker, and the striker get moved and stop here. Suppose we apply some powder on that. If we apply the powder on that board, suppose we apply the powder on that board, we apply the powder on that board and strike that same striker, applying the same force which is applied in previous situation, that is the first situation. If you apply some force on that striker, it get moves and slow down and eventually get stopped after covering some distance. So if we apply the powder on that board and strike that striker moves further than previous case. Means that striker moves further in the previous case. Means in that case, the striker moves a more distance. Why? So force on both cases will be same. Force on both cases is same. But the distance covered by the striker in both the cases will be different. Why? So, if we apply the powder on that board, the surface of that board become more smoother than that case. For example, suppose that is a board and that is the striker. Suppose that is striker. So we see that the surface of board is smooth. But if we zoom out that portion, suppose we zoom out that portion here, so that portions look like this. And that is striker. So portion between striker, that is striker, and that is board. So if we zoom that portion looks like mountain and valleys between these two surfaces. So that surface is not perfectly smooth. There is some disturbance. There is some mountain and valleys. So due to that, if we strike the striker, it covers some distance. In that case, if you strike the striker, it covers some distance and it will become slower and then eventually stop. Means if we strike that striker, it moves and after some distance it will be stopped because of these obstacles. So due to that mountains and valleys, it obstructs that striker and it becomes stopped. Means that board applies some force on that striker and then striker will become stopped. Means, or in further example, if we apply the powder on that board, the powder particles are very, very small. So these particles fills that gap and it looks like a smooth surface. That powder fills the gaps, fills that mountain and valleys. It looks like a smoother than first condition. So if you strike that striker, it covers more distance because by application of powder, the surface of board becomes smoother than previous case. Means in that case, the force of obstructing force will be less. In previous case, obstructing force is more, and that obstructing force is called the friction. obstructing force, acting force is called friction. What is the friction? The force applied by the ground, force applied by the surface of a board on the striker, that force is called the friction. And due to that friction, the strikers will be stopped. The force, obstructing force, act opposite to the motion of the striker, motion of that object. Friction, direction of friction is opposite to the direction of motion of anything. So that is the friction. Here the friction is more. Here in first condition there is no any powder apply on the board. So if you strike the striker, it covers some distance and will stop. Means here the frictional force is more. Obstructing force is more because of that mountain and valleys. After applying the force, in the second case, after applying the powder, the force of frictions will be less. Force of frictions will be less. So due to that, the striker covers more distance. That striker covers more distance than previous case because of the less frictional force. So what is the working of force? So what are the causes of force? What is the friction? So we can say that if the friction is more, friction is more, the object moves a less distance. Less distance. If the friction is less, object moves more distance. Friction is more, object moves, object covers less distance. And the friction is less, the object moves a more distance, covers some more distance. That is a frictional force. A man named Galileo Galilei discovers that frictional force. So he said that, so there is no only push and pull, the pull is called force. There is another some forces like frictional force. In the starting of that video, we see that the chair, if we pull the chair is in motion. If we push the chair is in motion. So if we push or pull the object is in motion. But there is one another force present in that motion. If we don't apply the force on the object will be stopped because of friction, because of frictions. So that frictions discovered by Galileo Galilei. He says that if the friction is more, so obstacles are more, means the object covers a less distance, and the friction is less, the object covers more distance. So Galileo found one more thing. It's a very, very important thing. If the surface of the board is perfectly smooth, if surface of board is perfectly smooth, then what will be happen here? If the surface of board is perfectly smooth, suppose the surface of that board, suppose that is the board, and surface of that board is perfectly smooth. Suppose that is the board, and here is the striker, and the surface of that board is perfectly smooth. There is no any obstructing force, there is no any frictional force. So if we apply the force on that striker, if you strike that striker, if you strike that coin, it will becomes move in that direction. So there is no any obstacle if the surface of that board is perfectly smooth, then that object keep moving, keep moving on, keep moving on at infinite. So that striker never will stop because that surface is perfectly smooth. Means if there is no any attracting force, there is no frictional force, if the object is in motion, then that objects never stop, it keep in motion, it keep in motion. That is the biggest discovery by Galileo Galilei about the forces. So if the surface is perfectly smooth, there is no any obstacle, there is no any friction force, then that object keep moving. If the object is in motion, then that object keep moving if there is no any obstacle. Before that, suppose initially they strike at rest. They strike at rest. If we apply the force, then it becomes in motion. Means if the object at rest position, if you apply the force on that object comes in motion. Means due to the force, the object becomes in a motion, and due to the force, that object stop in a motion. Means if we strike that striker is in motion, and if we stop the striker, suppose that surface is not perfect smooth, if we strike the striker, it covers some distance and will get stopped because of that frictional force, because of that attracting force due to that surface, due to that uneven surface, due to that rough surface, that striker will stop. Means force is needed to object in motion, or force is needed to stop the motion of an object. So here is the frictional force, it stop the motion, and here is, suppose here is a smooth, perfectly smooth surface, and if we apply the force on that striker comes in motion. Means if force is needed for object comes in motion, or force is required to stop the motion of an object, to stop the object in the motion. So these two important points: force is needed to move the object, force is needed to stop the object. That frictional force says, what is the principle of that frictional forces? What is the application of frictional forces? It stops the motion of an object, and some forces, if we push or pull the object, it start to move the objects. So that is the discovery of Galileo Galilei. So in the next session, we learn about the unbalanced and balanced force. So that is about the basic information of force and motion. So these are the very important concepts. So in the next session, we learn about the next types of forces, unbalanced forces and balanced forces. Thank you.